And what I would suggest is that he probably starts to put some meat on the bones before he puts.
Yeah, he's really trying to figure out, and we're hoping. I'm going to school for HR, that's what I want to do. But we're hoping some of these classes that I'm taking will help me get him up and running, if that makes sense. So,
If you want my business card, you can call me if you have a question.
yeah, absolutely.
I love to talk about stuff.
Well, he definitely wants to start one. And we just gotta narrow him down what he wants to do.
Well, and the important thing, there's two things that I think, you know, a lot of the business books that you read stuff are gonna say, find out your market, who your customer is and all that. And that's all true. But you also gotta be practical and think about, okay, I've got a market for, you know, building boats, but maybe I don't know how to build boats.
Right.
You know, so what can I do that there's a market for?
Right.
And that's kinda how I ended up starting this consulting first. Because it's what I can do, you know, it's what my skill set is. So I thought, I don't wanna go out and start something where I have to learn the work and have to do this.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
So if you can figure out a way to use the skills you already have, that reduces some of the learning curve, I think.
Well, he's done a couple of different things. He's been in the military. As a first officer, he had really thought about initially using our own boot camp or something like that. And it's changed a couple times. You know, his hobby is motorcycles, he tinkers and plates, and he's thought about kind of using that. I mean, it really just was, you know, that wasn't clear that. Yeah, we're hoping that, he's really hoping.
Well, if he wants it that bad, he'll come up with something.
And that's what we're just trying to narrow down, what do you really want to do?
Yeah, and that's the thing, is making the decision. Because, you know, to be perfectly honest, now that I'm in it, I think about things like, you know, venture 2 and venture 3 that I would like to do, but I have to constantly decide, okay, am I gonna take some of my energy and put it there? Because I had this great analogy somebody told me the other day, and it's that the monkey that's swinging through the jungle does not let go of the old vine until he's got a sure grasp on the new vine. And so you know, you gotta sort of,
Make sure you got.
yeah, make sure you got some.
It's just like the same, you know, you never put
Last
that.
time I checked, I don't have it.
Right,
Oh, this
right,
one.
yeah.
See, he's looking.
Yeah.
With the economy being in the state that it's in now, like, why don't a lot of companies opt to
You
hire
did.
their employees through like an employment agency?
Oh, she's
Like PEO.
Yeah, then just hire directly home because, you know, I'm thinking they wouldn't have to worry about things like maybe workers' compensation or paying the FICA or, so a lot of the employment agencies, they have different plans like health insurance and all of that, so they won't responsible for having to pay any of that, I don't think, or depending on the plan, they may choose the employment agency.
It's a philosophy, I think that,
That's exactly what she gave.
people tend to, companies tend to be a little bit, you know, concerned about getting employees through
You
PEOs,
need to change your major.
professional employee
There's no reason for Sheila
organizations,
May to be
because
your advising.
they're afraid what if that company goes out of business, you know, and some of that cost comes back to them. They're not, the thing that does help them, especially in the higher risk workers' comp areas, is the PEO can pool all of their different kinds of employees and get a better rate. You know, whereas somebody who's working in just, you know, teaching skydiving is just in that industry. So they can get some advantages by doing that, but they just haven't really been accepted very well.
They frown upon.
I don't know if it's, because, you know, there's some, like Jevity HR is one, and there are some that they are fun, and some that I've seen in other places, and some employers really like them, but I think the employers that really gravitate toward them have higher risk that they're trying to mitigate, and people that can get, and there's some additional expenses that they have to tack on to that employee, because they're not only paying their salary, but they're paying that percentage of benefit plans that's attributed to them from the PEO. You know, so some of that cost is coming back, and I think it is sort of.
So they are paying like toward the health insurance for the
Right,
employee?
right.
So
There's a
they're
fee.
just, so they're just, okay, so they're not just paying a set fee to the employee.
Right. Now, let me put it this way. Let's suppose you have an employee that you hire off the
Well,
street.
that falls under
and you're gonna pay them $16 an hour. And, then you decide to hire that same employee, oh, I'm sorry, through a PEO, now that same employee is gonna cost you $25 an hour. You know, I mean, that number's fictitious, it's not that high of the difference, but the difference, though, is something you can't control anymore. You have to decide, okay, it's worth it for me to get out of managing all this stuff and outsource it. You know,
So PPOs are just mainly good for quick fix for a company, like if maybe they need to hire out a lot of people and they don't have the time to sit and go through with interviewing a lot of people, so they may go through a PPO to kind of,
well, PEO.
oh, I'm sorry, PPO.
Yeah, because you're gonna get into a PPO in a minute, so.
So they may want to go through a PPO just to kind of sustain the employees that they need to cover the employment volume until they can physically go through and hire them.
Yeah.
That's mainly what it's for.
To me, well, it varies. I mean, PEOs from a business model want you to hire all of your employees through them, because that's the way they make money. Sometimes they'll be able to provide seasonal stuff,
year, apply for something.
but it's not steady cash flow. You know, it's gonna ebb and flow. And so they would prefer that you just hire all of your employees. Plus, the other thing is adding on those employees that are seasonal onto their workers' comp is gonna create a spike in the workers' comp coverage, and then it's gonna go away, so that's more maintenance too. So, you know, it's just sort of, you know, what works. I mean, there's a variety of different things you look at when you make that decision, what works for you. And some people just don't like giving up control. They wanna have their employees in-house, they wanna be able to work with them, they wanna, you know, they don't want to have a middleman in the middle messing around with benefits and pay and all that other stuff. They want their employees to be directly working with them. But other people,
What are you gonna take each semester?
So the work that you do, you work basically on a contract basis with companies?
I do
What your needs are?
yeah, I do a lot of work. I started out really project oriented, working on a lot of technology projects. And I'm not a programmer. I don't have an IT background, but I ended up working on a lot of IT projects because I would get involved with HR systems and help people figure out, okay, does it work this way? Does it work best that way? You know, is this process efficient, or are you, taking this paper and passing it around to everybody in the room before you finally do something with it, that kind of thing. So I do a lot of business analysis now, and we're getting into things like, we're starting to do some management retreats, which is interesting because I haven't done that before, and we're starting to get more into communication, and that's really part of a lot of what we do with project management too, is a lot of communication. We're putting in a big computer system, making sure everybody knows what's going on, and hitting deadlines, and making sure your managers have what they need to have.
There's too much.
Do you work in a specific industry, or are you kind of broad?
I don't really have to work in a specific industry, but you get more mileage out of tapping your experience. So I have experience in healthcare and in chemical, and built up experience in state and government agencies and stuff. And so it's kind of morphing a bit. And I'm hoping that it'll continue to morph, the economy won't slow it down so much, that I have to start worrying I'm going to keep the wheel moving. Because really, the work that I did in 2008 and 2007 to build up visibility and do marketing and stuff like that creates work in 2009 and 2010, because my sales cycle for this kind of work is really long. It can take 12 to 18 months before the project actually comes in.
So you can be a consultant person or just like help to help?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I mean, how?
How? If you get experience in healthcare, and then you just market to those people, go where they go, talk to, read the kind of materials that they read, talk to them at HR meetings, and just get out there and schmooze them and find out what they need, and it's the experience and the knowledge that you pick up and your ability to help them do better. But their healthcare people tend to be, because Nikki knows this, because she has a huge healthcare background, and then I have some as well, and healthcare tends to be, they like working with people that know healthcare.
And when you say no health care, they want people in their HR department who understands what the surgical tech does. and isn't afraid of it, who understands what a CNA does, who understands what a perfusionist does.
And that doesn't mean you gotta have a medical background.
Right.
But it means that healthcare is a 24/7 environment, and it's very crisis-oriented. So that means that you have to be comfortable in that kind of environment where it's very, very fast-paced and you're dealing with a lot of emotional issues, a lot of physical issues, that kind of thing. And once you get in,
I'm
you're
in
in.
healthcare, but I'm just wanting to see, how is it involved in the consultant part?
Well, we can talk about it sometime. My boss over there is kind of, saying, okay, teach the class.
That's a material to cover. You may be here till 8:45.
You won't like that.
And
but-
Leanna has changed her whole schedule for today to be here tonight. And I'm sure she doesn't want to be here any longer than she has to be, because her family's used to having her home at night.
Okay, we'll get started. Okay, we're gonna get into healthcare. And with healthcare, you have a lot of risks that you're managing in healthcare. So here we really get into some big money. So we're talking about, when I was working with a $40 million budget, half of that was healthcare. And it's because you've got to work, but that was only, 2,000 employees. So you've got a lot of expense here, there's a lot of risk mitigation, a lot of financial analysis that a lot of times people don't think of when they think about managing healthcare plans. You go out, you pay a premium, it's all, fine and good. But it's not quite that simple. You have different kinds of plans that you can use. You have indemnity plans, which are the ones where you hear about the deductible, the 80-20 split or the 30-70 split or whatever that split is. You have, in these plans, you have generally the ability to go to any physician or provider you want to go to. But there are some hybrid arrangements that have popped up over the years. Then you've got fees that are generated when the services are sold. So you go in to have a mammogram, you pay the fee then. That kind of thing. Or they file the claim and charge it against the insurance company. Managed care plans have rules around where you go and who you see. And the idea is, behind that managed care plan is a contract that exists between the facility and the insurance company, or the doctor and the insurance company. That doctor or facility has signed a contract with that insurance plan and said, I will provide these services to your participants at this rate, which is 75% of what the street rate is. Okay? That's how that managed care piece comes in. So they have to drive employees to those people that are what is called in the network. And the in the network means they've signed the contract. And that's where the savings comes in, because the idea is the volume compensates for the reduced structure, the reduced fee structure. But that's not always make the employee happy. So you have sort of that prepaid arrangement in the background, and then you also have co-pays and things like that that happen, that are a portion of it. And you guys are probably pretty familiar with those. Indemnity or hybrid plans, we talked about the deductible plan, but also a hybrid plan is something where you have some type of network component, but then it also gives you sort of this freedom choice. It's like a point of service plan actually decides how much you're going to pay for that service based on where you have it done, the point of service. So if I go in the network, it costs me less to get that service done than if I go outside the network. Because in the network, the contract is there, working for the insurance plan. Same thing with the preferred provider, where we're getting into the PPO. Then you've got the same kind of contractual arrangement. You've got people that are preferred. They're in network. They have a contract. But maybe you're penalized, or maybe it's not covered at all if you go outside of the network. These are all variations where they've kind of put together some managed care attributes with some indemnity attributes to try and keep employees happier in having greater choice, but at the same time trying to manage the care. Health maintenance organizations are much stricter. Often, if you're not going inside the network to one of their physicians or one of their facilities, it's not covered at all. So you're really restricted, and some of these are what are called IPA providers, like Kaiser Permanente is an IPA. That means that all of their doctors and facilities are owned by them or are employees. So you don't go to a Kaiser doc and that doctor has a contract. He's actually employed by them. And then their facilities are owned by them. They're very big in California, but you can see there's not as much around here. hasn't been as popular here. Actually, I'm sorry, that's the group and staff or employees of the HMO. The IPA is where they actually go to an independent facility and have the contractual arrangement. I got that backwards, sorry. I couldn't read my notes. So anyway, then you've got exclusive provider organizations where you can go to no provider except the ones that are within their network and the ones that they say that you can go to, or physician hospital organizations or PHOs, where sometimes physicians and hospitals will join together to create a network and to partner with an insurance company, so that this is also one of the ways hospitals make money, is to partner with insurance companies. Because if you think about it, Medicare and insurance companies are your biggest payers in the healthcare system. So those are the people that are out there trying to manage this expense. Other healthcare options that are kind of part of the overall health and welfare scheme of things are things like dental plans. A dental plan is very cash basic. That means I can pretty much predict what my expenses are going to be most of the time, because most dental plans have a cap. They say, I'm going to give you $1,500 a year to spend. That's it. So you multiply that by your number of employees, and that's your benefits budget for that plan, less any contribution. So those are, pretty basic plans. Vision plans, generally it comes out of the employee's pocket, and maybe there's a discount that's engaged in there. Prescription drug plans tend to often be associated with the health insurance plan. Very often they're not separated unless an organization gets to be pretty big. Then they may carve out the prescription plan as something separate to be managed, because it's such a big chunk of expense. Prescriptions are a huge chunk of the expense. So it may be carved out separately. Usually it's going to be part of your healthcare plan otherwise. And then employee assistance programs, where you go in to get short-term counseling that's free usually to employees on a crisis basis, and any other kind of alternative healthcare that might be something that's covered. Maybe they cover massage once a week, or something like that. We should all be so lucky, right? Healthcare funding is interesting because this is, again, where we're getting into the financial management of it and the risk management of it. Fully insured means the insurance company bears all the risk for the plan, and all I do is pay a premium. But remember, we talked about the experience piece. If you have high claims one year, then that's when your premiums hike up, because your experience, your volume has increased. So the same thing is happening with that premium. That premium is going to go up whenever your experience goes up. The other thing is, if I have a small pool of employees, generally those premiums are higher than if I have a large group of employees, because the risk is spread among the large group, whereas the risk is very definable on a small group. Now, the only thing I can think that would be different would be if that small group is composed of 20-year-olds, then you probably have a low premium. Unless they're childbearing women.
My husband is a mechanic,
Okay.
and he works with, because most of them are older.
Mm-hmm.
We can't afford to get insurance because it's so high.
Because it's so expensive.
And it's older men.
Uh-huh.
They're all like in their 50s.
Yep.
And so we can't get it.
Yep, it's very expensive. Yep. One of the things that you see a lot of companies going to do is, if they can afford to do it, because they have to have better money management, is they may move into health insurance that is self-insured. When you get into self-insurance, a lot of times what you have is like an ASO arrangement, which is, I might have a plan that's provided through Blue Cross and Blue Shield, and Blue Cross and Blue Shield operates as my ASO. They process all the claims, they manage all the paperwork, they send out the information to employees, they do all that administrative stuff. But they don't pay the dollar amount. They don't pay for the claim. They get money from me. So I'm a self-insured company. I send money to Blue Cross and Blue Shield. Blue Cross says, I need $1.5 million to pay all the claims this month. And I send them a check. That's a self-insured arrangement. Now, it could also be that instead of using somebody like Blue Cross and Blue Shield, I could use a TPA, a third-party administrator that does the very same thing. It's just not an insurance company. Does the very same thing. I send them a check, they pay the claims. Now, the thing here is, with what the insurance companies will tell you, is you get better reporting if you're using an ASO arrangement through the insurance company. You get better handling of your claims. You get faster service. You get access to all these extra benefits, like nurse lines and all this other stuff. Maybe it makes a difference. I would say it's, minimal. I wouldn't say it's a big hit, to reducing your bottom line. It could be advantageous, but you have to sort of weigh out your prices when you look at that. And then also, if you're self-insured, you usually have something that's called stop-loss insurance. Stop-loss means you usually have individual or specific and aggregate. Specific is if I have a claim that goes over $60,000. Any amount over $60,000 is picked up by this additional insurance. So that I don't have to bear, if I have a claim that's $100,000, I don't have to bear all of that claim. That would be a specific instance. Aggregate says, if all of the claims that I have for this claim year are more than $500,000, if I have $600,000 in claims, that extra $100,000 is picked up by the insurance. So that way you sort of minimize how much money you have to plan on having out of pocket. And some of that is built on what you know about your workforce, what your experience has been, how you can project forward the trends. You put those things together to try and figure out what's my budget got to be? What do I need to kind of plan for? And maybe you don't, some people don't ever have specific stop loss because they don't have that many claims that are singly responsible for that big of a chunk. But they'll have aggregate in place just in case. Okay?
Christy?
Yeah.
Before you move off this, their book on self-insured talks about, besides the ASO and the TPA, bringing your claims processing in-house within your own company. Now, I know that you have not used that in the past, and I think there's good reason for not using that. And what their book really talks about, it promotes bringing self-insured in-house. I think you can share the other side of doing that with them.
I wouldn't recommend it. Because you really get into a very sensitive area. There are HIPAA regulations out there that stand for the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. That is basically saying that PHI, or private health information, is protected by this regulation. And employers should only have access to it on a need-to-know basis, which means that very few people within an employer should ever see your personal health information. The reason is, and the reason this came up is because of HIV. Because when HIV started to come on the horizon and you were seeing employees that were coming up with this diagnosis, people were finding out about that diagnosis in HR, and the managers were finding out, and they were discriminating against these employees. So that's where HIPAA came up. So that it also helps employees to have more portability in their insurance coverage so they don't lose their insurance coverage when they terminate from an employer. There's a portability clause that allows you to keep continuation. But that's where this privacy came up. So any employer who's talking about bringing anything in-house that deals with PHI is really treading on thin ice. Because in my opinion, there's a conflict of interest there, and you really have to be careful about separating that data from anybody who might be able to get into it. There's just a lot of vulnerability there. Yeah?
So your employer has access to your medical file too?
You mean now? No, they should not. They should not. And one of the things that you'll see in the reports that you get back from insurance companies or TPA or anybody else, they should not see anything that is diagnostically related. They should not see, you'll get reports that say, Jane Doe had a claim for $500, but that's all it's going to tell you. It might tell you that all of these employees had claims for a doctor's visit, but it doesn't tell you anything about what that doctor's visit was for. So they have worked really, the insurance companies have had to work at changing their reporting so that they don't send anything to the employers that contains that kind of information. Which in some respects, as a risk manager, gives you less information to work with. Not that you want to have information about a personal person, you don't want that, but if you don't know that you've got 10 people out of 50 that have diabetes, you can't help them manage their health and take better care of themselves. You can't do any kind of case management like making sure that they're going to the doctor and some of those other things.
Except what you can legally do is ask, whether you're self-insured or fully insured, you can ask for who are the top 10 doctors that my employees use. What are the top 10 diagnoses for my employees? And maybe if you have a young population, the 5 top doctors are gonna be OBGYNs, and your number 1 diagnosis is gonna be pregnancy. Okay? So if you have an older population, maybe your top doctors are gonna be internists and cardiologists. And your top diseases are going to be various kinds of heart disease and hypertension, all things that relate back to that. But to go back to Brian's original question, when we're talking about bringing self-insured in-house, and I think this is probably where your question originated, if this is the employee population and I am employed in the same company and sitting in the same building with you and I'm processing your claims, I might be able to figure out that you're the employee that had the heart attack, because top claims, the most expensive one's going to be the heart attack, and it happened in the quarter that you just happened to be out for a couple of weeks, and the top doctor's a cardiologist. So I might be able to get back into that, which is why you don't want that information on site. You don't want it in the computers where somebody can hack into it. You don't want the paper files on site, which is the reasons that Christy and I would both be against bringing self-insured claims payment on site. And someday I'll tell you the story of the company that I worked in, where we were a medical claims paying company and we paid our own claims, and there were some issues with that.
That also brings up, thinking of HIPAA also is relevant with FMLA. And any kind of disability claim paperwork that you're paying.
So if you're in the HR and say, like, mine was a maternity leave, but the doctor said and said that I needed to be put on light duty for whatever, they cannot ask me why I need to be put on light duty. If the doctor's note says she needs to be put on light duty,
Right,
they cannot then say, well, what's wrong?
right. That's probably.
However, they can ask for a second opinion,
Yeah.
pay for that opinion, and send you to another doctor, and they pick the doctor, and you're obligated to go.
Some of the things that we've talked about in controlling healthcare costs are on the, not on the board. Just a test. But, there's a lot of different ways you can try to attack the problem. You want to try and keep your healthcare as accessible to employees. You don't want it to get out of sight where it's too expensive and they can't afford it and things like that. So you want to try and manage this cost as closely as you can and still give them the coverage that they need. And a lot of different things are done. Sometimes it's changing the delivery system, like moving from an indemnity plan to a point of service plan or a PPO or an HMO or something like that. Sometimes it's letting employees choose among different kinds of, like in-network, out of network, pay more for a service if you choose to have it done out of network. Redesigning policies so that they encourage certain types of behavior. Wellness, conducting careful reviews, all of these kinds of things. The one I want to bring your attention to is the last one, which is one that's sort of new, but it's starting to gain traction out there, and it is where predictive analytics are used to massage the data. There are companies out there where the data doesn't come inside the employer, but the data goes to usually a middle company that pulls it in through a software system and looks at the type of data that you have in your workforce. So they look at whether or not they may not have employee-specific information about who this employee is. They can get to that if they need to do case management, but usually it's a case management type of firm or some type of analytical firm. And they look at this and say, okay, employee 123 has a diagnosis of diabetes and is not going to the doctor on a regular basis. Because what that does is that tells you that this employee is not taking enough care and is moving towards a crisis. And a crisis will be much more expensive than if they take better care of themselves. So that gives you an opportunity to work with the employee to get them to maybe get into a better, maybe better exercise, better doctor, better prescription coverage, whatever that happens to be.